Corporate Finance Excel Practice Problem. In this presentation, we're going to work a practice problem in Excel related to the use of ratios to create account balances. In other words, we're going to pick up the ratios and some other information in order to back into the account balances used to create them. Get ready. It's time to take your chance with corporate finance. Here we are in Excel. We have our information on the left-hand side. We're going to put that into the blue area into our worksheet on the right-hand side. We're going to have some account balances as well as some of our common ratios that we've been working on. We're going to use those in order to calculate our account balances. The account balances we are looking for: accounts receivable, current assets, marketable securities, total assets, fixed assets, total debt. Now, normally, if someone was to look at this, they would probably, and if you were just going to start this and you didn't know anywhere else to start, you'd probably be looking at the first answer we need to get to, accounts receivable, and then going up to your data and saying, okay, how can I put together this data to calculate the accounts receivable? But what I would suggest is possibly doing it in the reverse order, maybe, and taking the information, the calculations that they have given us, the accounts receivable turnover, current ratio, debt to assets, and start plugging those in the format that you know them, looking for any unknowns, and anytime we can put together a formula with one unknown within it, then we can reformat that using algebra and figure out the problem. So let's think about it from that approach, right? So I'm going to say, okay, this is the data that they have given us. They've given us these calculations that have already been calculated. So I can think about this data and say, are there any ratios I can come up with based on this information, and or start with these ones that they've already given us and put together the formula and see if we can back into any numbers that hopefully will lead us to these numbers down below. So when we start to put the puzzle together, in other words, instead of looking at the end result that we need to get to, we might want to start putting together whatever puzzle pieces we can, just like we would in a jigsaw puzzle, putting the corner pieces together first or something like that. And then that'll help us just to construct the entire puzzle, which will help us to get to these numbers. So, for example, we might say, okay, the first ratio they gave us is the asset turnover ratio. So I might go, okay, the asset turnover ratio. Now, it might not be in the exact same order. So if I was to write this out by scratch, then I might just go, okay, the asset turnover ratio. Let's just start with that one because they gave us it. That's typically going to be sales, which is an income statement account. So we'll say asset turnover ratio, it's down here. I'm going to say sales, and then that's divided by the total assets, typically. Divided by the total assets is going to give us that asset turnover ratio. That'll give us the asset turnover ratio. So they gave us the ratio, obviously. So they said the ratio is this 1.4. I'm going to format this one to go to the Home tab. Numbers, add a decimal for the 1.4, and they gave us sales up top too. So they actually gave us two pieces of information. We only have one unknown then. Unknown, I'm going to make it yellow, right-clicking on it, making it yellow. Then I'll write down the algebraic equation. 4360000 divided by x is going to be equal to 1.40. Then we can solve for this using algebra and or I'm going to use GoalSeek to practice using GoalSeek. To use GoalSeek, I'm going to delete this. I'm going to then do the calculation, sales divided by total assets. Now, I can't divide by this number because Excel says, hey, you can't divide by 0, don't you know? It doesn't work. But we can put some number as a placeholder, 100, and then calculate it. So I'm going to go off the cell, Data tab up top. We're going to go to What If Analysis, GoalSeek, and then I'm going to say, I would like you to set this cell to be what we know it should be, 1.4, by changing the yellow cell. And then we're going to say, okay, and it'll adjust that cell. And then we can recalculate it if we want to just double check the calculation, sales divided by the total assets. I'm going to format paint this, go into the Home tab, Format Painter, and then I'll use the same formatting for that 1.4. So that's going to give us the total assets. That's one of the things we know. So we're going to say, all right, we found it. We didn't go right in the same order, but we found that. And again, we kind of reversed into it, going with our ratio first. Let's go with the current ratio. I'm going to say, all right, current ratio. I know how to calculate the current ratio. The current ratio is going to be the current assets divided by the current liabilities. So that's going to be up here. current assets over current liabilities is going to be the current ratio. And do we have either of those items? We know we have the current ratio itself, the 2.75. I'm going to go back, home tab, numbers, add some decimals, so the 2.75. We also have the current liabilities, so they gave us the current liabilities, so let's pick that up. And that means we just need the current assets, which is going to be our unknown, so I'm going to make that one yellow. We can do our algebra now, which would be the x divided by the 769,000 equals the 2.75. I'm going to use the goal seek. You could do algebra or goal seek. I'll do the goal seek, which is going to be equal to the current assets over the current liabilities. Then I'll go off the cell. I'll go to my data tab, to the what if analysis and goal seek. And then I'm going to say I would like you to set this cell to be the 2.75 by changing the yellow cell up top and OK. So then it's going to do the math for us, and there we have it. We can double check it by saying this is going to be equal to the current assets over the current liabilities. I'm going to then format paint this cell over, home tab, clipboard, format paintbrush, put that on over to here. There we have it. I'm going to underline this cell, home tab, font group underline. We'll do the same here, underline this cell. So there's our current ratio. Now we have the debt to asset ratio. So the debt to asset ratio, that should be an easy one to at least write down. It says exactly what the ratio is there. It's debt compared to the assets. So debt we can think of as liabilities. I put that one down here, debt to assets. So let's just pick that one up. Debt to assets, we know what the end result is. We know the end result is this 45%. So we got the end result. Let's go ahead and go to the home tab, numbers, make that a percent. I don't think we have either of the other two though. I don't think we got the total debt or the current assets. It doesn't look like we have those two here. So I'm going to leave that where it is. Let's go to the accounts receivable. Let's go to the accounts receivable turnover and pick that one up. So we'll go, that one is up top. Accounts receivable turnover is typically going to be sales, which is an income statement item divided by accounts receivable. Remembering that we could, if it might say, depending on the context, that it's average accounts receivable, because it would be, you're comparing an income statement account and a balance sheet account. So just be aware of that. We're going to be picking up the accounts receivable here. The accounts receivable is going to be the unknown. So the sales is going to be this item. They gave it to us. Accounts receivable, I'm going to make it yellow because that's the unknown amount. And then the calculation will be equal to the sales divided by the accounts receivable. Actually, I'm sorry. The turnover is known. That's the 8.5. Let's format it. Home tab, numbers, and make it 8.5. Now let's write down our algebraic equation. 4360000 divided by x, the unknown, is going to be the 8.5. Then we can use our algebra to calculate that, or we can use our goal seek. Let's use goal seek. I'm going to delete this and say equals up 2 divided by up 1 sales divided by accounts receivable. You can't divide by 0, or else, Excel tells you, hey, you can't do that. Like 0, you can't divide things by 0. So we're going to put 100 here as a placeholder, then click off the cell, go to our data tab, go to our forecast, what if analysis, and goal seek. Goal seek, we're going to say, hey, can you set this cell to be what we know it should be, which is 8.5, by changing the yellow cell, and then say okay. It will then do that for us, and there's the calculation. We can double check that calculation by working it again. Sales divided by accounts receivable. Then I'm going to format paintbrush it over, and I'm going to go to the home tab, clipboard, format painter, and paintbrush that one over here. And so that looks good. So now we've got our accounts receivable. Now we've done some of our main categories. Now it gave us this item down here. It told us, hey, look, these are what is included in the current assets. And I know that I have total current assets because we figured that in the current asset ratio. Didn't we do the current asset ratio? Yeah, we did that here. So I could say, hey, I know what the total is down here. Why don't I figure this out? I can say I know I got cash. It looks like they gave us cash. So they gave us cash. And the marketable securities, I don't see marketable securities. That's the unknown. So far, the receivables, they gave us the receivables. That's going to be this number. And then the inventory, looks like they gave us inventory up in the data up top here as well. And so the total current assets is going to be equal to the current assets here. Going to go ahead and underline. So now we have our unknown. I'm going to make that yellow. And we can do our algebra, which is 3230, or it's the other way around, dyslexic, 232000. And then I'm going to say plus x plus 512938 plus 870000 is going to be equal to 2114750. So now we can do our algebra or use goal seek. Let's use goal seek. I'm going to delete this. Simply put in the sum formula, summing these items up. And then we'll click off the cell. Goal seek is going to go to the data tab. What if analysis, goal seek. And then we're going to be picking up and say, hey, I would like you to set this cell to be the 2114750 by changing the yellow cell and then OK. So then we have that, and so that picks it up, and then we can kind of double check it here by saying equals the sum of these items. We'll sum it up again, and there we have that. So we've picked up that item. So that's going to be our total current assets. So we've got the total current assets that we picked up there. We've got the marketable securities that we picked up. We've got the accounts receivable that we figured out somewhere over there. Okay, so now we need to get to the fixed assets and the total debt. Fixed assets, total debt. Now the fixed assets, we'll typically think of those as like depreciable assets or PP&E, property, plant, and equipment. We're going to think of them in like a lump sum. I'm going to try to back into basically a lump sum of the fixed assets, assuming that total assets is consisting of the current asset portion and the fixed assets. So if I assume that total assets is consisting of, like we say, the current assets and the fixed assets, then I can say, all right, well, the current assets are going to be this, and then the total assets, then we're going to pick up the total assets here. And that means we can back into the fixed assets. That's going to be our unknown. So then I'm going to do this algebraically, 2114750. And then I'm going to add the x is going to be equal to 3113606. So then we can do that algebraically or with goal seek. Let's use the goal seek. We're going to say this is going to be equal to the sum of these items. And then we can then go to the data tab. We can go to the what if analysis and goal seek. We're going to say, I'd like you to change this cell to be what we know it should be, which is the 3113606 by changing the yellow cell here and OK. So there we have that. And then we're going to say, OK, we could double check it here equals the sum of these items. So there we have that again. So we're going to say that's going to be the fixed assets. And then we had our debt to asset ratio we couldn't figure out because we didn't have total assets, but now we do have total assets. So we're going to say total assets is that amount. And so we're going to back into the debt, total debt amount. Our equation then would be, the algebra would be x total, we got this divided by 3113606 is going to be equal to, I'm going to put this in decimal format, 0.45. And then we can solve for this algebraically or use goal seek. Let's use goal seek, deleting that item in it. We're going to say total debt divided by total assets. Then let's click off the cell, go to goal seek, data, what if analysis, goal seek. And we're going to say, I would like you to set this cell to be, and I'm going to do it with a decimal now, 0.45, by changing this cell, and then say, okay. So there we have it. We can double check it here. We can say, all right, let's double check this. This divided by this. And then let's format paint it. So I'm going to use the format paintbrush, home tab, and clipboard format painting over here. I'm going to put an underline on this item, an underline on this item, and just some formatting, and there we have it. And so we can pick up then the total debt we need to pick up, and that's going to be this one. Also note that there's going to be rounding differences when you use the goal seek, so you want to be careful of that, be aware of that, because it does round it. So if I was to say, take for example the total assets turnover and add decimals here, it calculated out to 1.400 and then 31, because it's using a basis of trial and error. So in other words, if you were to do the algebra here and say, I want to take this number divided by the 1.4, then you're going to come up with something different here. And because it's a large number, it could be somewhat substantially different on it. So just be aware that the goal seek, you're always going to have to deal with basically rounding. Goal seek is a good tool to kind of to get used to. I think it's a good tool to know about. But again, it does round it because it's using this based on the basis of trial and error, and it's going to base it on the trial and error up to a certain amount of decimals. It looks like this one's 4 decimals out.